Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the ideological roots of Pakistan. We're going to unpack the exact historical shifts, the harsh economic realities, and those really powerful ideas that took a disenfranchised population and forged them into a brand new nation.
So think about it for a second. What actually gives a nation its identity? And how do shared everyday hardships somehow forge this massive collective vision? Well, we're going to explore that exact question by looking really closely at the lived experiences of the Indian subcontinent's Muslim population under British colonial rule.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the power of ideology, look at the heavy impact of British colonialism, and the resulting economic and social marginalization. Then, we'll see the turning point with Sir Said's educational awakening, break down the two-nation theory, and finally, look at Jinnah and Iqbal's ultimate vision.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the power of ideology.
The word ideology, it was actually first coined way back in the late 18th century by a French philosopher named Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. But it's not just some abstract academic concept, right? It's deeply embedded in our sense of right and wrong. It's basically a framework that gives life meaning. It guides a community's political and social goals, and honestly, gives them the grit to overcome massive obstacles to reach a common destiny.
Moving right along to part two, the impact of British colonialism. To really get why the Pakistan movement sparked, we have to look at the sheer scale of the British Raj. This wasn't just a change in leadership. It fundamentally altered the entire economic fabric of the subcontinent. The British transitioned from the East India Company to direct rule, and they brought in policies designed strictly to feed the British Empire. We're talking about forcing the export of raw materials, like cotton and jute, flooding the market with imported finished goods, and essentially causing the domestic industry to completely stagnate.
Which brings us to part three, economic and social marginalization. Okay, so after the 1857 War of Independence, things got incredibly tough. The colonial administration grew highly suspicious of the Muslim population, and they basically set up systemic hurdles across the board. Imagine this. Critical land ownership was frequently taken away, leaving generations of people as landless laborers. Access to education was heavily restricted, which obviously killed skill development, and outright discriminatory practices locked them out of government jobs. On top of that, rural peasants were being totally exploited by the zamindari system, these powerful, wealthy landlords. It was just a massive, comprehensive economic disenfranchisement.
But it wasn't just about the money. The social and cultural alienation was just as intense. The British leaned hard into divide and rule tactics, and they replaced local languages with English in schools, which caused huge friction. A really pivotal moment our sources point to is the 1867 Hindi-Urdu controversy in Benares. There were sudden demands to replace Urdu with Hindi, and that sparked this massive wave of cultural defensiveness. When you combine that with basically zero political representation, the stage was totally set for a huge mindset shift.
And you can see how that growing alienation just boiled over into visible, street-level unrest. Muslims found themselves constantly locked out of the room when crucial decisions were being made. A perfect example is the Simon Commission of 1927. They were tasked with studying the Indian Constitution, but there wasn't a single Indian representative on the panel. Can you imagine? It sparked immense outrage and these massive protests with people demanding genuine political representation. So, how do you bounce back from that? Let's look at part four, Sir Syed's educational awakening. Enter Sir Syed Ahmed Khan. This guy was a total visionary. He realized that modern education was literally the only key to empowerment. So in 1864, he sets up the Scientific Society to translate Western scientific works into Urdu. This is the absolute seed that grows into the monumental Aligarh movement. Sir Syed's brilliant strategy wasn't to reject the West, but to integrate Western science with Muslim identity. He was preparing a whole new generation to actually step up and compete in that modern colonial world. Which naturally leads us into part five, the two-nation theory. The historical text really breaks down how the core values of Islam were in total contrast to the harsh realities of the colonial era. On one hand, you had the colonial reality, massive disparity and absolute marginalization. But on the other hand, you had Islamic principles championing the intrinsic equality of all people, social fairness, and the right to self-determination. This really sharp ideological divide laid the moral groundwork for demanding a totally separate state. And all of this culminated in the two-nation theory. It basically asserted that Hindus and Muslims in British India weren't just two different religious groups. They were two entirely different nations. The argument was that when a minority's entire social order, their culture, art, architecture, everything, is fundamentally different, they are a distinct entity. So at its core, it wasn't even about drawing borders at first, it was about protecting a distinct way of life.
Finally, let's look at part 6, Jinnah and Iqbal's vision.
The movement absolutely needed a political architect, and they found an unparalleled one in Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. In February 1935, Jinnah actually makes it official, using the term nation for Muslims in the Legislative Assembly. And working right alongside him in the realm of ideas was the philosopher Allama Iqbal. Iqbal kept emphasizing that you couldn't just have political strategy, you absolutely needed a solid spiritual foundation and cultural renewal for this new identity to actually thrive. Jinnah's framework for this new country was incredibly ambitious. He wasn't just asking for land, he was building a society from the ground up. Step 1 required absolute national unity to overcome all those ethnic and linguistic divides. Step 2 demanded true democracy and the rule of law. Step 3 focused on robust economic growth. And Step 4, the ultimate goal, was unwavering social justice and equal opportunity for absolutely everyone, no matter their background. I really want to pause on this because on August 11, 1947, Jinnah delivered this incredibly powerful statement to the Constituent Assembly. He was a fierce advocate for religious tolerance and minority rights. He saw equality as the absolute bedrock of the country's ideology. He made it crystal clear that while the state was founded as a homeland for Muslims, its civic framework was meant to be entirely inclusive and deeply democratic. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider how the historical pursuit of an ideology still echoes today. This entire transition from colonial disenfranchisement to an independent nation was fueled by really specific ideals: equality, self-determination, and justice. Do those founding ideals hold the key to solving today's challenges of modern nation building? What lessons from that era can we apply right now? It's definitely something worth reflecting on. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the foundational ideas of this incredible historical movement.